Hello, hello. This is Christina Barr. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christine Barr, and today we're going to be talking about it's not a tweet because he said on Truth Social, but Trump had posted something after there was the bombshells that were released from Twitter about Biden campaign and other folks having connections with Twitter, asking for particular things to be censored, internal conversations about the Hunter Biden laptop. Like, everyone knows the story was suppressed, but they had this whole like fake hacked materials thing, and it clearly from the conversations, it's like they came up with this excuse and then they found a way to just try to go along with it, but they really just wanted the information censored. And of course, we know beyond that, you had all these intelligence former folks who were claiming it was Russian disinformation. And I have a clip to show you guys from the debate when Biden was, claiming that it was, you had all these people who claimed that it was Russian disinformation and stuff. So they very much lied. They very much lied in order to keep this under wraps. It was the big October surprise, and they suppressed as much as possible. So now Trump is obviously upset and has been upset because he's felt like he was robbed the whole entire time. But he's not tweeting, but he's posting some wild stuff, which he did have some clarification. So I do have those posts as well. But we will read, and there's like two different ways to read this, but I don't. None of them are attractive to me. So we'll talk about that. Also, I want to talk about the Georgia election because it's so fascinating to me. Cognitive dissonance, I guess, because there's this group, a page called Woke Preacher Clips that just finds woke preachers. And so they've posted a couple from Georgia and pastors talking about the Georgia election, etc. And there's one particular clip that I'm going to show you guys of one pastor who clearly has a problem with Herschel Walker, but then begins to describe things that Warnock obviously supports. So the question is, why? Why would you support someone who's going to push for things that you are so opposed to? And the Black church is just so uniformly into supporting Democrats. And I've talked before about why Black people vote Democrat, about perceived heritage and perceived culture and other stuff like that. You can go back maybe like a year or two ago, maybe on my page, and find it, because it was about an hour long broadcast and it was really good. Maybe I'll have to condense it a little bit down some more, but there are reasons for that. But the question is, why do we still have to let this be a continuous cycle, particularly when this pastor is going to say some specific things that Warnock specifically supports? So we'll talk about that. Also want to quickly mention Disney Plus Willow. They did a good old bait and switch, which is what they do nowadays. And I'm not surprised, but some of my sisters were upset. I didn't really watch Willow, but my sisters were annoyed, and so were a lot of people on my page when I posted about it. So before we jump into everything, I want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, different merch that we have. I'm not the victim you're looking for. Be better, not better. We got the denounce white supremacy defeat Joe Biden shirt with a list of some of his racism on the back, which I saw a TikTok video today, just very briefly, and a friend of mine had stitched it. That just means he replied to it, and someone said, "Well, you're gonna have to prove that Joe Biden is bad for the Black community." I'm like, where have they been? Because um, it kind of seemed like a conceded point. Um, Throughout the election in 2020 that Joe Biden had been historically bad for the Black community, particularly when people mention, they'll go to the crime bill and all the other kind of stuff. They'll mention stuff like that. Even Biden has had, like, he tweeted out something like, in all this time, Black women have never been able to really succeed or been treated fairly in this country. I'm like, how long have you been a part of government, sir? Like, why didn't you make it like I don't agree with him, but why like if it's so bad and you've been in government like since the end of Vietnam War, why should you be president? So it seemed really fascinating to me that he didn't have an answer. So I'll have to go back and answer that. But anyway, yeah, I got this shirt with a list of some of his racist stuff on the back. So that's a little bit of the merch that you guys can get. Also, I also have different books you guys can check out on my website. I'm a content creator in that sort of way. If you guys got kids, like chapter books, these are good, wholesome books that your kids will like. I'm told that by the children, that is epic. Also write for like young adults, and I do have a nonfiction book out. These are all my books. So if you go to blacktnews.com and hit the merchandise button, you will see my merchandise, Black tea stuff, but there's a banner that'll take you to my book website. A book that I don't have out yet, but I want to mention is, of course, God is Blatantly Against Abortion, and I'll let you guys know when you can get that up for pre-order. It would be a very great read for you guys. And that's all for the announcements. Besides, if you want to support Black Tea News, you can go to blacktnews.com/donate and support. It costs a stream, it costs from my website, all the good stuff. If you guys would like to support, I very much appreciate you. God bless you. Thank you guys for sharing, for liking, for commenting. All that does really help. Thank you for your support. So I do like to normally start with something that's humorous, and I usually start with a meme. But I have this video of Obama saying something that I thought was quite humorous. It's true, and I think it's worth a chuckle.
We all know some folks in our lives who we don't wish them ill will. They say crazy stuff. We're all like, well, Uncle Joe, you know what happened to him. It's okay. They're part of the family. But you don't give them serious responsibilities.
So, okay, I will admit I don't know the full context, but I'm assuming he's talking about brought up that example because he is campaigning for Warnock. So he's probably talking about Herschel Walker, like Herschel Walker's okay, but you don't let people like them like go run stuff. So I'm assuming that's the context, but it's very funny that the example that he used, as in the person he's around, but no, you don't let them over stuff. They're not competent enough to lead and watch. It is the current president of the United States. Now, when he said Joe, maybe he didn't mean Joe Biden. Maybe he didn't mean, the person who was his vice president. Maybe Obama didn't mean that Joe, but maybe it was just like a Freudian slip. Maybe it was just a dishonest person accidentally being honest in that moment, and it just slipped out of him because that's the person in his mind, the forefront of you never, underestimate how Joe can bleep things up. That's Obama. So, very interesting confession from the former president about his VP. I would assume. Now, maybe he wasn't talking about Joe Biden. Maybe he was talking about some other Joe. Again, I've only seen that snippet, but I would not have used I would not have used that name in such a scenario. I just thought it was funny, and context or not, I'm going to clip that in very humorous ways to poke fun of Joe Biden. So I just wanted to share that. Now let's get into. I want to start with the Herschel Walker story, or at least the Black church thing, and then we will go into Trump and some of the not tweets but his posts that have um become a conversation, we'll at least say. So the election, it is the 5th, tomorrow is the 6th. So there's been early voting. Don't know which way it's going to go. I've said openly, I'm not terribly optimistic, but that doesn't mean people shouldn't go out and vote. Like, if you go and turn out, like, Warnock has like lower voter base. He has overwhelmingly black support. But a lot of older people, are gonna go ahead and pull the lever for Herschel, as long as people go to the polls and older voters, I guess, outrank like more younger ones, then I think they can still pull it off. You got, Kemp going out there campaigning and other folks campaigning. And then there's people who may not necessarily like the character of Herschel Walker or some of the things that he's done in his past, or they're willing to forgive some of the stuff in his past. There's at least saying that it will supply a good check in the Senate. And that's true. It will supply a good check in the Senate. Now, some people don't want to be checked, so they're obviously going to vote for Warnock. But if you're like an independent, or if you're a conservative or Republican who, I don't know, I've seen people say that they want Herschel Walker to fail because they basically want to stick it to Trump, and they want to continue to damage continue to sever the ties that Trump has, or the hold that he has, the grip that he has on the Republican Party. Don't be that way right now, please. Like, just go out there and vote, because it is a good check, because it does put pressure on Joe Manchin and Sinema, and having that extra Warnock vote will give them more leeway. And so don't do that. And besides, wouldn't you rather have the Republicans outnumber the Democrats? As far as like, because I think it'll just still be the two, right? Cory Booker and Warnock. And there was two before with Kamala, but she got, she went and became VP. And there's um Tim Scott. So if it will be Tim Scott and Herschel rather than Warnock and Booker, and it'll just be Booker. I think, I don't think there was any like new black folks who got like elected to the Senate. But anyway, that's the battle in Georgia right now. You can put a check on the Senate, put more pressure on Manchin and Sinema. We're not going to be able to take the majority, but you can continue kind of at least the dynamic. Now, is it annoying when Republicans don't act right and betray you, such as, recently with some votes in the past? Yeah, sure. It is like Romney and whatever. Sometimes they'll still be able to get that Republican crossover, but it puts pressure on a lot of people at the very least. So go ahead and vote Herschel. You guys can primary him in a couple years if you really don't like him, if he doesn't do too good of a job. But he did surprise people in the debate. I don't know what kind of debate coach he had, but people felt like he actually came out on top of that. And maybe it's because Warnock didn't answer enough questions and dodged a lot. And Herschel Walker at least had some good dings at him, like, why do you want to abort these babies? You should be baptizing these babies, because he's a pastor. So it is an important race. But I wanted to talk about how Black Democrats, particularly Black Democrats in the church, vote so uniformly one way. And it's interesting because there's all this talk about Christian nationalism and evangelicals, and how much of a danger they apparently are to our society. And but people don't have that same kind of energy when it comes to the Black church. And the reason being, and I do go to predominantly Black church, but my church and a lot of churches that I know that are predominantly Black do vote conservative. I know plenty that don't, though. I know plenty that don't. But a lot of people that I know who are our friends, my dad's friends, they're of the similar kind of vein. And my dad's been talking people's ears off for years. So yeah, I know a lot of Black conservative churches, and some decent sized ones. However, that's like more of a minority thing. Like, Herschel Walker is not competitively going for the Black vote in Georgia, at least from the polling, at least that I've seen. It's heavily going Warnock. Now there are some progressive churches that agree or maybe preach like Warnock. I've heard at least maybe not specifically maybe Georgia, but in some southern churches there'll be some churches that have like a different associations, they'll send like a older pastor or something will retire, and they'll bring in a younger guy, and the younger guy is woke. But there's also just there are older people who have been preaching more kind of like Marxist kind of progressive woke stuff for a while, and are more kind of black liberation theology weaved into Christianity and stuff. But there are people who genuinely have more conservative type leanings, but they just pull the lever for Democrat. And there's a couple different reasons for that. Again, I've talked about this before in the past. I have a video that's about an hour long, way back on my channel. Maybe I'll try to link it somewhere, of why Black people uniformly vote Democrat. See if I can remember some of the top of the head. There's like 3 primary reasons. One is just identity, our perceived identity. The Black Americans, more than any other race, see their race as being central to their identity. Pew Research, according to them, it was like 85%, opposed to like white people, it's like 15%. So Democrats have done a very good job marrying your racial identity with politics. So if you are not a Democrat, it's like, let me take your Black card. You are what's wrong with you? You're an Oreo, whatever. You're degraded. You're demeaned. They they don't allow you to open up your mind to another possibility of something else. And if you aren't a Democrat, then something is wrong. So they've had a hold on that for a while. And I said it's their perceived identity because Black people obviously used to be Republican. The Republican Party was founded to free the slaves, and it started breaking off in like the 30s with like some promises of the New Deal, which ironically a lot of those things didn't work out for the Black community. Redlining actually came out of like that era, and minimum wage and stuff ended up. Minimum wage actually has a eugenics history, and there's just a lot of things that people perceived were a benefit to them and which really weren't. And then more started fractioning off later, and then you got to like Goldwater and stuff like that, and more. There was Exodus, but it really started earlier. Another, what was another example? The identity is a big one. I'll have to go back and try to link it. I'm sorry. But there were 3 primary reasons. So why I feel that Black Americans particularly and predominantly vote Democrat. But it's not because a lot of people, one of them is perceived policies, like what people say they will do, and then the reality of it. Like, an example, people in the 30s started to make that switch, and it was like a lot of this stuff did not help Black people in the least bit. And there's another one, but I'll have to again link that later. But you guys should go and watch the whole thing if you're interested in the topic. But this particular pastor, it talked about Herschel Walker, and in like mid sentence just started complaining about Democrats. It seemed like not really knowing that he's complaining about Democrats, intending to go and vote for a Democrat. So again, there's a page on Twitter, a user called Woke Preacher Clips, and he has stuff from all over, but he has had a couple from Georgia, and so I got this clip from him, and there's a link to like the live stream and stuff that you guys can go check out the church and the pastor as well. But I thought this was really fascinating. This is the level of cognitive dissonance right here.
Confused. Anytime you have a Negro like Herschel Walker in a runoff with an intelligent man like Pastor Warnock, and Herschel Walker know nothing about politics and nothing, oh God. And yet people will look upon him as his career in NFL as if he can make a difference in Washington. We've got a problem.
So I do want to point out, like, I am someone who I don't think that Herschel Walker was a particularly good candidate, and not just because of how I'd assume he wouldn't be able to maybe convey particular Republican messages, but which again he floored and um really raised expectations during the debate, and surprisingly won that debate. Herschel Walker is not Herschel Walker, Warnock is slick with his tongue, like any old sly devil, I suppose. But he also dodged a lot and didn't want to say a lot. And Herschel Walker was able to ding him quite a few times with some comebacks. So people can surprise you, but he does obviously have a messy past that has really come to light as well, which Warnock is no saint either. So we could talk a little bit about that as well. But people can surprise you just because they have some kind of athletic background, or if they're an actor or something. That doesn't mean that they should be disbarred from actually making some kind of service, as far as the arena of politics. Anyone should be able to serve. Now, should people just be able to be elected because of their popularity and stuff? No, not really. Like, you would hope that they have some kind of other qualification, but I just want to say that just because someone comes from a particular background does not mean that they won't do a good job, or they're not civically engaged, or that they're not intelligent, or anything else. So that's just kind of a blanket thing. I mean, we did have, I don't know how much he would agree, but we did have a pretty good president who was an actor. So let's go on.
When people still support a fool who talks about himself being in the same level with God, like a Donald Trump.
So I don't know what he means by that. That just seems like a slander of character right now, talking about Herschel Walker as if he places himself on the same level of God. That I don't get, which I think people do that all the time. When you think that and Christians do all the time too, in my opinion. Like, what if you try to elevate yourself above his commandments or his word or something like that? Yeah, you are elevating yourself up above God. So people do that way more casually than I guess that I think he means to say. But I don't know what particular example he means with Herschel Walker. It just kind of seems like he's defamed his character at this particular point. But keep listening.
Our world is in trouble. It's confused.
Our world's in trouble, guys. It's confused. Keep listening.
I couldn't support anybody who have the alliterated gall to put themselves on the same level with God. That's a great picture of the scripture when he talked about how hard it is for rich folk to enter into the kingdom. That you're so rich and so foolish that you think you're just as powerful as God. And to have people to support that foolishness. Our world is in trouble. With people who will stand up on national television and tell church folk that you who stand behind your Christian religion and your Christian faith, get over it because we're supporting same-sex marriages.
Pause. Oh, like what? The Respect for Marriage Act that just passed through the Senate now. Granted, a couple Republicans crossed over there, and they also crossed over in the House and voted for that. But that you have like Warnock versus Herschel Walker, and he's talking about the world is in trouble, and now he's going on a rant. He's gonna mention abortion too, but he brings up homosexuality, and he's going to bring up abortion after he just complained about Herschel Walker. And but he's obviously going to vote, if he has not voted for Warnock already.
And we're supporting abortions, and get over your religious beliefs. Now, to show you how hypocritical America is, how can we have the freedom of religion and then you pass a law for abortions and same-sex marriages when it goes against my religion. How can I have a right when you're making what I'm saying is wrong legal? And then tell me to get over it, that I've got to accept it? Really?
Now, I think his logic on that tracks. Unfortunately, there's there's a missed application here. So here's the thing. So Warnock is notoriously pro-choice. He's not only pro-choice, he keeps saying he's a pro-choice pastor, which I find a pretty egregious thing, period, to say or be or claim to be. I did a TikTok about this some time ago. I said he's using his authority as a pastor to make it seem like this is something that's okay, like something that's permissible. Like if I said, "Hey, I'm a pastor and pineapple goes on pizza," you'd probably be like, what does that have to do with anything? Exactly. What does him being pro-choice have to do with being a pastor? Because they don't correlate. They don't correlate in the least bit. I got this book coming out that will go in depth about, of course, God is blatantly against abortion. So you guys can check that out. But in the meantime, I do have an article on my website about, of course, the Bible is blatantly against abortion. At least in the meantime, you guys can read that if you haven't at blacktnews.com. So his position as a pastor does not track theologically with what's actually in the Bible, if he actually cares about what's in the Bible. Now, in my opinion, if you have, and I'll go into more depth with this later, but if you have a pro-choice pastor, I think you need to reevaluate where you go to church, and I think you need to evaluate the difference, if it's a difference between like they have bad theology or if they have bad politics. If something isn't tracking, maybe the perception of the policy or something, and you can have that conversation. I'll go into that deeper later, but I just wanted to throw that out there. But if the logic is, hey, women still have the choice, and that's why he's a pro-choice pastor. Again, he doesn't need to keep announcing that, because he's trying to use his level of authority to say, hey, other people out there on the fence, guess what? I'm okay with it. You guys should be okay with it too. And he's tweeted stuff like, I think the government is too big for a government and the woman and her doctor to be in the doctor's office together. And I always thought that was interesting. Because one, I don't believe that Warnock in the least bit is someone who believes in small government, like most Democrats don't. So I don't believe that abortion is about a limited government role when a lot of these people bring it up, especially a lot of these same people who were pro-vaccine mandate, even though they were like, oh, we're not going to do it. Oh, we don't have that authority. And they're like, you know what? We're going to make OSHA enforce this on all businesses with 100 employees or more, coerce you into it and break your legs until you comply. Not literally break your legs, but just break your spirit and your wallet, your will, until you comply and get this shot that isn't going to stop you from spreading it. So I don't believe that any of these people truly believe in bodily autonomy, and no one actually believes, well, I won't say no one, I don't like to use absurd absolutes. Most people do not believe that bodily autonomy is absolute. You don't get to do everything you want with your body, especially if it affects someone else's body and you start violating someone else's space or their rights, or you're violently aggressing upon them, which in the case that would be with abortion. But also there's some things that we just believe for health reasons or for the good of society, that you don't like hard drugs or something like that. That's your body, but we're still not like, heroin. I just don't think you should be able to buy that and sell it and use, now some of these Democrats like Mr. Fetterman, who just got elected in the Senate, is for legalizing of the hard drugs. But a lot of people are like, I don't think that's a good thing to do that. Or there's a Supreme Court case with gosh, I can't think of it in the top of my head, that allowed for like vaccine mandates way back in the day. Um, and it basically said like, if there's some kind of public interest, there needs to be some kind of like limited compulsion or something there. So if you agree with something like that, isn't there not some kind of public interest to not kill millions of babies? I think so. I think so. Um, so anyway, Warnock is not some kind of limited government Democrat. He's not. So saying the government, like the hospital room, it's too big to have the government in there. But also as a pastor, a reverend, or whatever, it's interesting that he doesn't talk about the father being in the room with the mother and the baby. They don't want to talk about the baby. But what about God? Like, where does God come in? Where does God come in the equation? Like, you could at least encourage women to choose life and life more abundantly. As one of the really good lines at the debate, I already mentioned it, was when Herschel Walker said, "You should be baptizing those babies." That's what he should be doing. That's what he should be doing. You're like, well, what a woman's choice. We don't all agree with women's choices. We don't. We don't. He's not school choice. He's not school choice. And we could go on, but people don't respect all women's choices. People don't believe that people should be able to do whatever with their bodies. There are different limits. It's just with abortion, they want to be able to have basically no limitations on it. So this pastor here complaining about abortion, and then they say, get over it. And it's true. He said, how can we really have freedom of religion when they'll pass things that violate our faith and they say get over it and just comply? How, like, I've had conversations with people recently, like on Twitter and or whatever, about Jack Phillips, and there's a Supreme Court case that's going to be heard of a I don't remember where she's from, but a graphic designer who makes websites and stuff, but she doesn't want to make a website for like a same-sex wedding or something like that. And so it's a case that's going to be similar to the Jack Phillips case with Masterpiece Cake Shop, when he had a cake shop, but there's particular things that he wouldn't make specialized cakes for, and he was sued because he wouldn't make a gay wedding cake. And then he's also been sued recently again, maybe or he's still in court because he wouldn't make a transgender transition cake or something. So a lot of this stuff is not about liberty and freedom, and it's really about about privilege tyranny, I suppose you could say, a strategic tyranny, in the case of Jack Phillips. And so the landscape of the court is a bit different than it was last time. The Jack Phillips case was in his favor, but it was very narrow, so it just basically kicked the can further down the line. So we'll see what the court ends up saying. But people are trying to tell me like, no, you're free to worship in your church. I'm like, it's free. It's a free exercise of my religion. I'm not a Christian at church. When you are a Christian, you believe that you are, we call it being born again. You are a living sacrifice. You are, you ask Jesus to come into your heart, to forgive you of your sin, and you become a new creature, and you live your life for him. You are a living sacrifice. That is your good and reasonable service to your God. So it's not something that you like clock in and clock out of, that you press pause on, and that only exists in the church. If you are a part-time Christian, then that's just a thing out of convenience. It's just a club, but it's not like a way that you've transformed your life and decided to live. So if she can't say, hey, I don't want to use my particular creative skills to make this thing, and you're like, well, it's fine if you are in church and you're a Christian, but that's just something you do privately. That's not really liberty. That's not really freedom. So I don't understand why people think that their privilege to coerce people into compliance is more powerful or more profound, or something that we should uplift over people's right to freely associate, to freely worship, and to freely exercise their religion. I don't understand that. Yet here we are again, and we'll see what the Supreme Court decides. But I think this preacher had a good point. Like, they want to pass these laws, and then they tell you to just get over it. And he's complaining about it, but yet he's going to go vote for a man who's going to continue to make that happen, because Warnock, he may be a reverend, but he's not someone who's adhering or living biblical truths out loud. And you could say, hey, I admire how he keeps that, separate or whatever. But look, he's posted some things. I'm just like, that ain't Christian. That's gosh, he did some kind of crazy tweet about Easter that was just like a total misunderstanding of the purpose of Christ's sacrifice on the cross. I'm like, this guy doesn't get it. And there's been other clips of Warnock where I'm just like, bruh. I'm like, I don't know what God you're serving, but I don't think ours has the same name. But again, cognitive dissonance. He doesn't like Herschel Walker, and I don't live in Georgia. I'm not going to vote for either one of them. If I was in Georgia, I would vote for Herschel Walker. But and I don't know who the primary opponent was off the top of my head, but Herschel Walker, I wouldn't have suggested for him to run. That was Trump's pick. That was his boy. He pushed through, and I thought there were issues. I thought there were problems, and some of his dirty laundry as far as his, escapades as a popular athlete came back to haunt him. Particularly, there was the accusation that he paid for an abortion in the past, and which he denied. There was a check and a letter, like a card with his name on it. We covered that in the show in the past when that became like big news. And so he denied it, but his son Christian went off about it because I guess he thinks that it's true, and he knows there's some Herschel didn't really raise him. And he talks a lot about absentee fathers, and that's important to him because he's felt the scars of not his father says he loves them, and it's seems like he does, but there's a difference between loving someone from a distance and actually having a present father in the home. And so that was crazy how he blew up on his dad and stuff over that. But my issue was, if this really happened, just confess and come clean. Don't lie to people about it. If you've had a change of heart, a lot of people have a change of heart. I know quite a few women who are very, very pro-life who were profoundly affected by the abortions that they had. And they have obviously had one in the past, but they don't believe that it's something that should be a right for everyone else to do. And they want to save people from making the same mistake. I know someone who did pay for their girlfriend in the past to have an abortion, and they carry the guilt, not just because their child was killed, but because they know how it affected the mother, and that they were a part of that they put their name and money to that. And that's something that they have to live with. So people can make mistakes, people change, and people advocate to do the right thing. You had was it John Newton? No, John Nobel, who wrote Amazing Grace, who was a slave ship captain, who changed and became like a big abolitionist, who encouraged William Wilberforce, to keep fighting the good fight, to stay into politics, and he told him, like, you could be called for such a time as this, in a reference to Ruth in the Bible, and they ended up, getting rid of slavery in the UK. So people can have a change of heart even on something that they were for, and be like, you know what, this is an evil thing, we have to end it. So he denied it. I'm not saying it's inconceivable that someone could make something up like that up, but I think it's more likely that he wasn't telling the truth. But who knows? But I guess God does. But Warnock has issues himself. Of course, I don't like his policies. I don't like the things he's going to vote for. He's been accused of domestic violence by his ex-wife. He's also has an ex-wife. That's not great for a pastor, but so he's been accused of domestic violence from her. There's been some seedy stories about his church that's bought up property and has tried to evict people for like very minimum amounts of money. So they're both not great candidates. But as far as this pastor talking about particular policies, why and maybe there's other ones that he supports more that would cross him and push him over into the Warnock side of the aisle. Like maybe it's not just like those two things that drive him so much, but he did complain about it. And I thought it was interesting, like like an immediate flip, complaining about things that he know that maybe I would hope that he's aware of the fact that the person he's going to cast the ballot for is in support of the things that he's against. And I do know some pastors that my dad got into a huge argument with a friend of his. I don't know if they're still friends. I saw him a couple years ago. It was a little awkward, but it was okay. Maybe it was about a year ago, but they were having a conversation about voting, and he was a Democrat and my dad's a Republican. And so they were talking about abortion, and my dad doesn't think that you should support anyone who's in support of abortion. If there was a single voter issue to vote on it, I mean, that's a really big single voter issue in my opinion, but they were going back and forth. And so his pastor friend wanted healthcare, and he's like, well, I need it. And my, oh gosh, my dad led into him. I don't even want to repeat what he said, but it was just like, oh boy, I don't know how y'all can be friends after that. And but yeah. So people have different issues that they will take precedent, that they will allow to take precedence over, but that doesn't mean that it's right. Especially if they're minded, they minimize something like abortion. I got into it with a friend of mine. I believe we're still friends. I haven't seen him in person in a while, so it's just mostly been Facebook talk. But we've been heavily debating about abortion. And so I was talking about Prop 3, and I said, if you vote for Prop 3, you know, there's 30,000 lives that are taken in Michigan because of abortion. If you vote for Prop 3, you're signing your name to their death warrant. And he didn't think that was a fair statement. And I'm like, how is it not? You are agreeing to let this continue. If you don't, like, the laws on the books, it will be outlawed. These children will not be killed. If you vote for it, you will. And he's like, people don't actually want to kill babies. I'm like, well, first of all, that's not true. There are definitely people who make money off of that, who are incentivized to do that. So I said, do I think you want to kill babies? I said, no, but you've convinced yourself to not mind that it happens. And I think that's unfortunate. And that was the end of the conversation, at least on that. So I'm sure we'll have some more in person one day when I see them soon. It's not something that I plan to drop in my state, even though we got like shellacked, but you got to keep up the good fight. But anyway, this was interesting. I'm going to show you guys one more video really quickly. I didn't mean to spend so much time on this particular topic, but though fascinating. So here's a preacher who's just really gonna say some stuff.
I had to ask the people, which side are you on? Which God are you going to serve? Choose ye this day whom you will serve, Walker or Warnock. As for me and our house, we gonna serve the Lord.
Why would you like use a scripture like that? Like, who are you gonna serve? Like, is that what happens? Do we elect people to serve them, or do they serve us and our interests? And that's another thing to look at. Like, who do you want to go to represent your interest? If your interests align with Warnock, I guess that's fine. But as pastors grouped together, what is it particularly about Warnock that just jives with your faith as you're gathered together in a church?
We're going to vote for Warnock. We're going to work for Warnock. We're going to march for Warnock. We're going to pray for Warnock. We're going to vote for Warnock. And we're going to keep on moving until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. God has called us for such a time as this. And Georgia, we will meet the challenge. We will send the message to America. We will send the message to Donald Trump, and we certainly will send a message to Herschel Walker that we have been on the battlefield for too long. We're not going back. We're not going to allow our children to go back. We're not going to allow our votes to be denied. That's why we turned out this weekend. And I'm here to tell y'all, they ain't seen nothing yet. Come December the 6th, we're going to send the right man to the Senate. We're going to send Warnock to the Senate. The state of Georgia will be proud of who we are. And all of our friends will come to Georgia. It's our time, Bishop. Yes, it's our time because it's God's time.
Man, I really hope Warnock loses, if anything, for that rant that just happened. What? I'm just so curious to know, like, policy by policy, why? Because it just kind of seems like there's just all these talking points, as a rhetoric of, like you mentioned, Donald Trump. You're going to show them. We're going to show them. We're not going back. Like, going back where? Where do you think you're going? Like, to the party that historically discriminated against you, because that's who you're voting for. I did one video about the party switch, and I just looked. I just went through like southern states, and I just showed people the lines of like the governors and stuff. I'm like, yeah, blue, 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 blue. Oh, you start getting to red in like the 90s or something, like. And there's like maybe like a peak of red or something during like Reconstruction era, but it's blue, 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 blue. And it's red like just consistently like in the past couple of years or something. So when you're saying you're not going back to like to where to the people who have historically been unkind to Black voters, like, is it just listening to this rhetoric of Joe Biden talking about Jim Crow 2.0 because of the different voting rules or whatever, and then Stacey Abrams saying stuff and forcing like the All-Star game to like leave the state and generate revenue elsewhere? Like, is it just like purely propaganda that's making people have these views and not allowing them to analyze like step by step? Like, is this person actually going to represent you in the best way that you want? There's some southern states that like I was talking about Florida in the 2018 race, and you had Andrew Gillum. Thank God he lost. We're so lucky Florida dodged such a big bullet, but he was a Black guy, and he was going against DeSantis, who was not like the greatest campaigner, just to be frank. And I was talking to somebody about the race, and I'm like, there's people down there, they like stuff like school choice, or Black people like stuff like school choice, and they want options for their kids. And I heard someone who's on the ground who said that that's a reason why people did break for DeSantis anyway. One of the many reasons. But also, like, Andrew Gillum's talking about raising taxes. Like, people don't move to particular states down south so they can pay more taxes. And Stacey Abrams was going to raise taxes, and and the Warnock is going to vote to raise your taxes and stuff too. And they'll claim it's only going to affect certain people, which is not so. They know it's not so, but they keep saying it, which, by the way, Senator Warnock still owes people $600. They said, if you elect me, you're going to get a $2,000 check in the mail. Did not happen. They gave you $1,400, and they're like, well, there was a down payment. It's like, how did Trump get a down payment? That was a whole nother man. That was a whole nother president. That was a whole nother everything. So how the heck is there not a $2,000 check? Now, I just find it fascinating that they decided to not give everyone a $2,000 check, and they gave everyone a $1,400 check. It doesn't make sense to me, and I just wish there was an explanation to why they reneged. I like understand the excuse, Or I've heard the excuse. I don't think it's a good excuse. But they spent so much money anyway. I just ponder why they just didn't shove out the extra $600. And of course, $600 to a lot of people is still a lot of money, but they still spend it on their friends and all kinds of other stuff in ways that they didn't need to do it. So why is it that you and I got just shafted $600? I'm just so curious about it. And I wish someone would really ask Warnock on the campaign trail, though it's too late anyway. But I'm sure a lot of people who voted for him already, or intended to vote for him, already voted for him. Yeah, but it just seemed like that pastor and those folks, they just have rhetoric and things that they believe, not even so much attached to a particular person. They'll put a name to it or whatever, but it's really just how they feel about the party in general. And it could have been Herschel Walker, it could have been DeSantis. They'll still say similar things because they're just so devoted to voting a particular way. It really is like a brainwash. And if you begin to think differently, you are condemned. So I don't know if any of that going back again was like our voices will be heard, etc. Like I know there was a recent lawsuit with voting, I think, on Saturdays, but just in general with like the voting laws, when they were talking about all the rhetoric that Biden and Stacey Abrams was saying when they passed the new voting laws. I know that Kip actually invited pastors to talk to him and had conversations about like not what they're saying isn't true. This is blah 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 blah. And I actually did a podcast with one pastor who did meet with him and had the record set straight. So again, a lot of rhetoric, and people, we need to reach out to these folks and have conversations, and we need to continue to do that. And the Republicans in Georgia need to really, really fight hard if they don't want to lose their state, because a lot of people will move out to Georgia because there's a lot of people who work in different industries. There's the movies and other stuff because of lower taxes. And if you don't want, to one day to have Georgia wake up and be like a California, you've gotta, well, you can't stop people really from moving in, I don't think, but you got to do something to change the hearts and minds of the people there and when they come in. So that's work they'll have to do on the ground. But again, fascinating with a lot of these Black churches and just the level of cognitive dissonance. Let's talk about Trump and some of these tweets. Not tweets. You guys know what I mean, tweets, though. So, well, before we get into it, Elon Musk purchased Twitter, of course. He started digging into files and to conversations, which the leftist media is very upset that there's conversations and people's names are on them. You're like, this is a threat. They're very upset, and the journalists covering it, they're like, oh, imagine carrying water for the world's richest man, world's richest billionaire. And so they keep repeating this talking point. And I kid you not, there's so many journalists attacking the journalists covering the story, talking about how they're carrying water for a billionaire. Like it's a repeated talking point. Like maybe they all got like on a PowerPoint presentation or some kind of group phone call, and there was like, this is what we want you to say. This is the narrative. Please run it. Because there's a lot of people going that route, as opposed to just covering the story, because it is newsworthy. The whole thing is newsworthy, how there was this big colluded effort to hide this, I guess, suppress information, suppress free speech, to have everything be so lopsided, because it's something that everyone's aware of, but people try to deny. But in particular, the Hunter Biden laptop story, that was something that was very newsworthy. And some people tried to like diminish it a little bit by just referring it to like some kind of by a Hunter doing porn or stuff like that. And ignoring the fact that it does have information with his ties with other countries and business dealings, and that Biden is joined with that. I mean, these people, they've shared like bank accounts. He's like accidentally paid for like his hookers, but they do have a joint business venture. And even before the election, you had a business partner who came out and said that the 10% is for the big guy, is talking about Biden, but the press denied it. The press ignored it. You had folks saying that it was Russian disinformation, and not just like Twitter eggs or folks just talking out their butt nowhere online. We're talking about people who actually had prominent roles in power in the intelligence community who came out and said this is Russian disinformation. And there's probably a lot of them who probably knew that wasn't the case, but said it anyway because the FBI did have the laptop, and you had the FBI reaching out to like Facebook and social media companies and saying, "Hey, there's some Russian disinformation around," and then the whole laptop thing came, so they suppressed that. And Twitter basically they pulled the handle on censoring the story, and then there was these internal conversations like, does this actually make sense, like why we did this? And like, well, it's a hacked materials policy, so it just sounds like there's something that they came up with to justify what they did, and not something that was justifiable. And obviously it wasn't justifiable, but there was like a whole conspiracy here. But I do think how the media acted, how they ignored it, and but particularly the intelligence community claiming that was Russian disinformation, and then how Biden acted, because he's not a candidate now, he is the president of the United States, and he knew that it was true. And at the time he did deny it at times, I suppose, but not very hard. And there was obviously stuff that was confirmed in the emails to know that it was true. But these people need to be held accountable for the collusion on this particular thing. Now, am I saying overturn the results of the election like Trump is suggesting? No, but there needs to be some kind of accountability. And I don't know if there can be any sort of legal accountability, but there at least needs to be some kind of accountability from the citizens to not put up with something like this. And there does need to be some kind of huge outcry, and some kind of vengeance as far as the electorate and as far as our voting goes. Who knows how that will manifest, if it will manifest, but there at least needs to be some kind of shockwave in that sort of form. One of the things about the Hillary Clinton Donald Trump race in 2016 that really concerned me, one of the big reasons why I wanted her to lose, and there were a lot of reasons, don't get me wrong, but I was reading the Podesta leaked emails, and one thing that really alarmed me was the amount of, I guess, kind of collusion or coziness that she had with the media, that really concerned me. And I know people have like relationships and whatever. I mean, I have friends who I will have to write about or talk about or whatever. But it was uncomfortable how close they seem to be. And there's like, oh, we have this headline, oh, it's like, oh, we want you to say this. And it was uncomfortable. And I'm like, if she has this much, even Trump being the nominee was part of her plan, like that, and which was something that they also talked about. Her staff was concerned about in the emails because they seemed like she was relying too much on the fact that her plan was, let's get Trump to be the nominee. And how did the media gave him all this time? They talked to him and whatever. I don't think it was all just about ratings. I think that people were probably in on the plot. Maybe if there wasn't an official meeting, but I think like people knew, like, yeah, let's let Trump be the nominee, and they just didn't expect that he would, of course they didn't expect that he would beat her, but she was most concerned, well, least concerned about Ben Carson, Ted Cruz, and Trump, and they got a lot of play, but Trump more than anybody else, and Trump ended up being the nominee. And they unleashed all this stuff, and they thought it was going to take out Trump, but people disliked her more than they disliked him, and of course the rest is history. But I didn't think it was appropriate to have all the power that they had, as far as media, entertainment, government, etc., and the media so one-sided, and then her be the president too. I'm like, there needs to be some kind of checks and balances. It's too much power for one side to have. It's way too much power. And if the media is not going to hold her accountable, is just going to, even how the media treats Joe, like they'll do a piece or whatever here and there. I think the most critical stuff was Afghanistan, which was just like irreprehensible. But there, as far as like fact checkers and stuff, it's they would after Biden got elected, like, oh, we can take a breather now. It's like, this man is a notorious liar. What do you mean you can take a breather now? Like, continue to do your job. But they definitely treat Trump and Republicans vastly differently than they do Democrats. But peeking behind that veil at how comfortable they were with one another, I'm like, this is a problem. This is a problem. So I think this is a really huge problem. How everyone was willing to cover this up to deny Trump the presidency. So I mean, if it wasn't a big story, which it was a big story, and it was an important story, that's why they suppressed it. But if it wasn't a big deal, they could have just let the people decide. Even it came out in October, October surprises happen, right? But if it was able to make a difference, then it made the difference. Now you got people like Sam Harris who's glad it was suppressed because he liked the outcome. And by the way, Sam Harris is no longer on Twitter because I don't know, maybe he decided to get off because pressure he was getting or hammered, or because Trump was on, not Trump, but Trump was unbanned and other people got unbanned. I don't know, but he left Twitter, but he had this really damning conversation, this interview where he was fine with the conspiracy to hide this because he thought Trump was so dangerous or whatever that he needed to be stopped. But I think it's interesting that they think one man who is so dangerous, who they've were able to hinder throughout his entire presidency, is more dangerous in a system that colluded all together to stop him. Why is the system less dangerous than this one man? That it didn't make sense to me, but he's got his own cognitive dissonance to deal with. So anyway, I'm going to play this clip from just to refresh your memory.
50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant. They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage.
This is classic Trump. We have 4 days left, and all of a sudden there's a laptop. There's overwhelming evidence that from the intelligence community that the Russians are engaged.
I still think that the stories from the fall about your son Hunter were Russian disinformation at a smear campaign, like you said.
Yes. I know you'd ask it. I have no response. It's another smear campaign. It's the last-ditch effort in this desperate campaign to smear me and my family. The vast majority of the intelligence people have come out and said there's no basis at all.
Yeah, so he would use the intelligence agency to say it's bogus or whatever, as far as like just blatantly just being like, no, like it's absolutely like he obviously, there were times when his people would not just flat out deny stuff, and then there was stuff that was confirmed. So it seemed pretty obvious to me that it was all true at the time, especially how they reacted to shut it down. Now, when I first heard that Rudy Giuliani was going around somewhere checking on some stuff, and then there was a laptop that appeared and he found it, and it did sound like a crazy story, don't get me wrong. So I don't doubt people for not believing it at first. But a lot of stuff that happens with Hunter Biden makes a lot more sense when you just remember he's a crackhead. But and just being honest, that's what he is. So he did leave that laptop there. It wasn't hacked materials or anything like that, and as stuff came out, it was obviously true. And then there are people on the right who had access to the laptop who offered other people, like Jack Posobiec, kept offering Jake Tapper, like, hey, you want to see it? You want to see it? And people didn't want to know. People didn't want to know. And so people were very late on acknowledging it. CBS just reported, like, what was that, a week or two ago we talked about it, and they like, oh, but it was real. It's like, really? We've been reporting on stuff found on the laptop for more than a year now. So more than a year. So expect even stuff that has been deleted. So imagine like more stuff coming out, like knowing this stuff anyway for Trump, and then seeing more of the stuff come out. So of course you're upset, but then he he posts this. So with the revelation of the massive and widespread fraud and deception in working closely with big tech companies, the DNC and the Democrat Party, do you throw the presidential election results of 2020 out and declare the rightful winner? Or do you have a new election? A massive fraud of this type of magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. our great founders did not want and would not condone false and fraudulent elections. So people are like, Trump has gone too far. And then there's people like, I've seen people push back against people saying that and say, you guys aren't being generous about how what he meant when he said this. And so it's interesting in the threads where people are like, this is too far, he's gone too far, like old man's off his meds or something along those lines. And then I read in the comments like, you guys aren't interpreting what he said correctly. So I start reading the threads to see how people explained it. And I have not found an explanation that makes me feel better. just to be honest with you guys. So so I he's saying that the election was rigged. Understood. And you could say that the massive fraud of these types of magnitude allows determination of rules, regulations, and articles, and those found in the Constitution. So the people who are saying you have to give him a generous reading of it, and the people who are reading it and saying it's bad, they're saying that the massive fraud and stuff is the stuff that the Democrats did, and therefore you got to have some kind of. He's saying that there needs to be a new election, and I don't know. I kind of feel like both people are interpreting it the same way. They're just not comprehending it the same way, I guess, because it seems like people are explaining the same thing, but the end result is that he believes that he should be installed as the rightful winner, and that's just not how it is. Now, I went to quite a few, like I went to a Stop the Steal rally. I went to a couple of dinners that were related to that kind of stuff. And I can now, when I was spoke at that kind of stuff, I would always talk about media manipulation. That was something that I knew. That was something that there's an article from Time magazine about the secret cabal that like saved the democracy or saved the election. So I would talk about stuff like that. That's what I focused on. You know, everyone was that I knew was pretty concerned starting out with the election and stuff that happened at Cobo Hall and other kind of stuff, TFC Now Center, stuff like that. And some things panned out, a lot of stuff didn't. People will disagree, agree or whatever. So I focused on like the media stuff. So but people who would go to those things, and I believe many people who went to January 6th to support Trump and make their voices heard or whatever, mostly believe that they were following a path that was laid out for them to have some kind of remedy within the Constitution. All these people, they didn't believe that they were overthrowing democracy. They didn't believe that they were throwing out the Constitution. The people who believe that they could select different electors and stuff, they believed that they had the grounds to do that. The people, you know, just like and they were like, we could get our electors there, they could certify, etc. Yes, they were trying to change the results of the election, but they believe that the election was genuinely fraudulent, and that they had a pathway to set things straight, especially as they're waiting for these different court cases and lawsuits, etc. And which, by the way, there were like instances where there's people who say, hey, Dominion changed votes. There's people who are like, hey, there's people who voted who shouldn't have voted because there's procedures and stuff that was done that was inappropriate. And in some cases, like in Pennsylvania, that was ruled, you know, to be so, or you had Jocelyn Benson, where there's like judges like, why did you tell them to have less scrutiny when they were looking at signature verification? So there's stuff that like made people raise their eyebrows, or there's rulings on curing of ballots and other stuff like that in places where I don't think they should have or whatnot. So there's all kind of conversations on how deep you believe all this goes, but people believe that there was some kind of pathway to legally have some kind of justification or vindication with the outcome of the election. Okay, so just a little background there. You can agree or disagree. I'm just trying to explain from my experience, what was in the mindset of a lot of folks. There was something that someone asked me to say at the Stop the Steal thing. Like, we want everybody to say this. And I was like, I ain't saying that. I don't remember exactly what I was. I'm like, I'm not saying that. And it wasn't like, let's go take over the country or something. It was just like something legally that I didn't know tracked in that moment. So I wasn't going to say something that I disagreed with fundamentally. But all of them believe that there was some kind of pathway through the Constitution. So saying, well, there's no kind of remedy, it's not in this, but our founders wouldn't have wanted it this way. Therefore, like, do we just declare me the winner? Do we just put me on the in the oval? Like, that's not. I don't know how you have a generous interpretation of this. I was listening to Bob Duco earlier today, and he was just like, it sounds like Trump is he didn't say losing it, but he said unraveling, maybe he said. This wasn't a responsible tweet for the former president of the United States who seeks to be president once again. I'm if that offends you, just one of those you're offended days, but I don't. Even if I try to take the generous interpretations that people are saying, he's still saying that he believes that he should be installed, and that's regardless of if there's a remedy in the Constitution right now or not. So he did have some clarifications. I guess he said the fake news is actually trying to convince the American people that I said I wanted to terminate the Constitution. This is simply more disinformation and lies, just like Russia, 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 and all the other hoaxes and scams. What I said was that when there is massive widespread fraud and deception, as has been irrefutably proven in the 2020 presidential election, steps must be immediately taken to right the wrong. Only fools would disagree with that and accept stolen elections. MAGA. So terminations of all. So he did write termination of all rules, regulations, articles, even though it's found in the Constitution. I don't believe he meant. And maybe this is where people are like, you got to be more generous towards reading. I don't believe that he means that you throw out the entire Constitution and like just flip over the whole table and start over again. I think he means regarding to the particular election. I don't think he's talking about throwing out free speech. I don't think he's talking about throwing out the Second Amendment, certainly, and all that other kind of stuff. I don't think that's the case. I think he's talking particularly about the president, how they're voted for, installed, etc. Still not good. And I saw some people like, no, he's right. He's right. Really? That we're 2 years. It's 2020, the end of 2022. It's the end of 2022. So by June of 2023, if other people are going to run, they'll probably announce like that time, and he'll have a primary to fight in there. But to think that someone's just gonna install him. Now there are people who kept talking about like any day, but the people who are like convinced of that was kind of more tipping toward like QAnon stuff. Now there were people who were like up until that. Well, actually, there were people longer, but there were people who were again went to January 6th believing that if Pence could just hold off and they can investigate a little bit more, maybe they get a little more time to be able to be like, hey, this was fraudulent here, blah blah blah, and have that kind of remedy. Pence disagreed with that interpretation. Other people disagree with that interpretation. There are people who are around Trump who are like, there's people in your ear telling you things that you want to hear, and it's basically over. And we all know what happened, but there are plenty of people who believed and still believe to this day that it was a fraudulent election, and there's degrees and shades on how fraudulent people believe that it was, whether it was, you can't debate like at least the media collusion or the intelligence community, like lying about the Hunter Biden, like the FBI obviously had the laptop. I'm sure some of those people were aware of it. Like, so, and you know that Biden, who's the president now, who's campaigning, was aware of the stuff being true. So there was this massive working together with big tech, etc. You can't deny that portion of it. You can't deny that Time Magazine wrote an article about how people came together and they fortified or saved the election and whatever. So there's an agreement about certain things that happened, to the degree of what was inappropriate as far as legality and how much government hands were on it, because the government actually limiting your free speech is something that is not, legal in that regard. Or it just depends what else we find out, what else we learn. um but they believe that there was some kind of remedy. Trump saying that we're 2 years in, and that, what do we do? Do we install me? Like, um, I don't know. Those are questions that were better left in his head rather than on True Social. And then to not expect people are gonna like take it as he wrote it. He also said we want people who legitimately won the election to lead our country, not people who had to cheat in order to win. Simply put, if an election is irrefutably fraudulent, it should go to the rightful winner, or at a minimum be redone. Where open and blatant fraud is involved, there should be no time limit for change. That's not how things are. That's not things are. That's as like, we vote and we cast our votes, and but the electors go go cast the vote for the winners, and it's certified, and it's been certified. Joe Biden has been sworn in. He left the White House. All the formalities are done. And to flip over the table to change the rules, I mean, it's like people complaining about, like, oh gosh, Trump won, but he didn't win the popular vote. I'm like, those aren't the rules. Those aren't the procedures. That's like not part of anything that is. So this, uh, you can love them. You can still be diehard if you want to, but these are not good posts. These are not good posts. Do I think that Trump, if he wins again in 2024, he's gonna throw out the Constitution? Do I think that's in his heart to actually do? No. But this is too much. This is too much. And people are like, he clarified. I'm like, this doesn't make the point better. As, I mean, it just clarifies he doesn't want to terminate the Constitution, but he wants to do things that aren't within the power of the Constitution, though, to make him president right now. So somebody got a call into Mar-a-Lago, some kind of resource. You might want to, I don't know, try to calm him down or something. Take a beat. Take a beat. Last thing I just want to mention, because I am over quite a bit. Maybe I'll talk. I guess I don't have much to say, but so on Sunday morning, my older sister, was my roommate. She comes in my room to talk about Willow on Disney Plus. I don't know if I've actually ever seen Willow, but I do know that my older siblings watched it. That was one of their fantasy movies that they really liked. And she was, I guess, saw some TikToks and people talking about it. And so she's like, did you know that it's not even really about Willow? It's really about two lesbian girls, and he's not even like the main character, and it follows more of them. And she's like, and the critics are like, they're really hyping it up, really like it, or whatever, but they like Willow centric episodes the least. And I'm like, oh, it's just like a bait and switch. So they get you what I call it nostalgia bait. They get you something that you love, that you appreciate, and they get your butts in the seat, or they get your eyes on it while they go ahead and push stuff that they want to. So I had a huge video that I talked about nostalgia bait with Blue's Clues, and they brought Steve or whatever back on for something, and I'm like, but they're putting all this LGBT stuff in your preschool and having a drag queen do lead pride parades. I'm like, they're getting people with nostalgia bait, make the parents feel comfortable. They put their kids in front of the TV, and then they teach them things that don't jive with their values. So that was a pretty viral video that I talked about and did that with, but you keep seeing these repeated patterns. They'll use something from the past that you're really attached to, and then they'll switch some stuff up. And my oldest sister did watch like the first 2 episodes of it, and she said there was a kid who was like Val Kilmer-esque or whatever, and he like immediately gets kidnapped. And I guess the girls have to go save him. So there goes your masculine energy. And one of my viewers, followers on Facebook, said that there's actually a trans actor who's playing a woman in it. So I guess they took a woman's role there. So they wanted to make a gay LGBT kind of fantasy, and they used Willow to do it. And if you're cool with that, you're just cool with that. But I just I think it's fascinating, and they're gonna keep using stuff that you love to keep pushing their agenda. Now with the new / old CEO coming in and wanting to not make stuff so political, or at least he's not going to pick big political fights, but he doesn't see. He said he doesn't see stuff like this as political, or things that people would claim are political as political. So there's people like Chris Rofo and other folks who are like, oh, we wounded Disney and stuff. I don't know if that's the case. I think they'll still they do need to reevaluate a lot of things because they're not making the money that they thought that they'd be making. So I assume they still like money at the end of the day, but that doesn't mean that they're going to back down on all their ideologies very soon. I stopped watching Disney because I think it's pretty evident that they resent people. Like they don't like people like me, and they resent their customers, people who built up certain things. Like think about all the, like, we have so many comic books that we invested in. My dad invested so much time and money in, and we read these books, etc. And they go in and they take something that people love and they carve out their insides and wear it like a skin, and to just promote their progressive values and other stuff, whether it's the Red Skull dissing Jordan Peterson, and or a big example is the Punisher. They changed his logo because too many people, I guess, on the internet were using his skull and having like a blue line or something in it. And they're like, we don't want this associated with the police or pro police. So they went ahead and just changed the logo. I'm like, how can you have t-shirts and action figures and you have films and you're just going to change this iconic logo and make it looks like a pirate or something now, and change the logo out of spite? Like you could just sue people and just be like, don't use our logo for that. Instead, they're just like, no, they like this, so we have to destroy something that is a brand that is ours. It's just how much they resent us. And so Eric July had really good advice. He said, don't give more than half your money to people who hate you. And I'm like, that's really good advice. And Disney, their entertainment, and there's a lot of people addicted to stuff like that. They have kids, and I get it, it's hard or whatever. I definitely think the fact that I didn't like Endgame, and I like, hate is a strong word, but perhaps I hated it. It was easier to sever the tie because I disliked it so. And perhaps it was easier to sever the tie with Star Wars because I disliked not The Last Jedi. I didn't see that one, the one before it. That's not the Force Awakens was the first one. Whatever one was the I guess it was The Last Jedi because the other one was a Skywalker, someone Skywalker. So yeah, The Last Jedi. I hated that one so much. Maybe it's easier to sever ties because I'm not crazy about the content or whatever, or the direction that stuff was going, but I deeply know that these people resent people like me, my beliefs, etc. And if I complain, they hate when we complain. They make fun of when we complain, but they expect us to complain, and they resent the fact that we complain. And they want us to change our values, and then if you don't, and they're mad because you didn't see their film, and then you have people like Chris Evans calling you a dinosaur and hoping that you die out one day. Watch you pray for a freaking meteor, Chris. So yeah, I not fond of the company. So it was interesting seeing people's reaction to it. There were some people who had some strong reactions on social media, being very upset about it. All caps, anger, like I can feel it coming through the screen. So don't trust these folks. don't trust these folks in the least bit. And to other creative people out there who make content, like such as myself, keep writing, keep building, and people who with money who can help make stuff that like that happen, go ahead and invest and build a parallel economy, because I don't think these people are gonna, you know, get it together. And they like taking old IP and making it and flipping it and making it very progressive and pushing the things that they like. I don't have this image up, but I did post it on Facebook from the American Writers Guild, I think it was, did a panel talking about like stuff like comic books and taking the IP and either making more queer characters or changing the characters to make them have some kind of legacy characters to make them queer. So there's a strategy. It's not happening. It obviously wasn't happening organically, but it is obviously happening strategically. And there's evidence of it. And not just from Disney's like not so secret agenda conversations, and it's not just Disney, but there is a effort to change things that are popular in the culture to include a lot of progressive ideas. So we'll talk more about that later, I'm sure, but I gotta go. I am really over, but hope you guys enjoy the show. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, etc. Please check out different merch that I have. If you're still like on the Trump train, just get the goat hoodies and the goat t-shirts. Gosh, it's such a cool shirt though. It's a cool hoodie, so comfortable. It is very comfortable. I have both the shirt and the hoodie. And I do have them in different colors. You guys can check that out. And maybe you can let me know different variations of it. I can probably remake it with some different folks and as well. But I'm not the victim you're looking for. I already showed that one. My money, my business. The Roe and Casey aborted. And also got different mugs you guys can check out. Also check out different books on my website. And you go to blacktnews.com and hit the merchandise button. It'll take you to my book website, and you guys can pick out some stuff, especially because it's Christmas, coming up. Get a book for your loved one. They like young adult novels, new adult, children's chapter books. I do have a nonfiction faith book, and I'll let you guys know when this one is up for pre-order. It'll be very soon. God bless you guys. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com, and make sure you guys are sharing, subscribing, all that good stuff. God bless you, and I'll see you